Across deserts, forests and mountains lie the faint outlines of cities time forgot. Walls buried beneath grass, roads erased by rivers, names lost to silence. These were places once filled with voices, ritual and order, but they left behind no written story, no enduring name, only stone, clay and questions. Archaeologists dig, patterns emerge, but the people remain shadows. No one mourned their vanishing in a book. No one remembered their rulers, yet their walls still catch the wind. Their temples still face the sky. What does it mean to build a world and leave no trace of yourself in words? Why do some civilizations vanish without a sound? Join us as we move slowly through the ruins of forgotten kingdoms, erased fortresses and unnamed cities, each one built with care, each one silent now. This is not a tale of conquests or heroes. It is a quiet walk through what remains, the Ubaid of southern Mesopotamia. In 1919, archaeologist Henry Hall stood under the sun-baked sky of southern Iraq, brushing away dust from the ruins of a low, weather-worn mound called Al-Ubaid. What he uncovered did not match the grand stone ziggurats of later Sumerian cities, but something earlier, cruder, quieter. The remains were made of mud brick, shaped in long rectangles and carefully aligned. Beneath the surface, strange figurines appeared. Figures with elongated skulls, sharp features, and what some described as reptilian faces. These objects, carved in stone or moulded from clay, held infants, sat cross-legged, or wore headdresses. They were not labelled gods. They were not labelled at all. The Ubaid culture predates the Sumerians by at least 1,000 years. Scholars place its beginnings around 6,500 BCE, continuing through 3,800 BCE. It stretched across the alluvial plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Settlements such as Eridu, Tel al-Ubaid, and Haji Muhammad were among the earlier sites excavated. Eridu is sometimes called the world's first city, yet the Ubaid people who occupied it are rarely mentioned in common histories of Mesopotamia. There are no known kings from the Ubaid, no monumental inscriptions. Their temples were small, layered on top of one another like sediment. In Eridu, beneath the later ziggurat, archaeologists found no less than 17 separate temple structures, one built over the ruins of the last stretching down through time. Each was made of the same sun-dried brick, with niches in the walls and platforms that may have held offerings. Nothing in the ruins tells us what the offerings were. Some of the Ubaid figurines were discovered without context, buried among house walls or mixed with common debris. One from Tel al-Ubaid had its arms folded across its chest, eyes shaped like seeds, lips thin and pressed. Another, found in Eridu, held a small object, perhaps a staff, or perhaps nothing at all. A few of the figures appear to have been broken deliberately. No texts accompany them. No descriptions exist in later Sumerian mythology. They are not listed among the Anunnaki or the Igigi. They are not named. The Ubaid economy relied on irrigation agriculture. Canals were dug from the riverbanks, guiding water to crops like barley. Their tools were plain, formed from flint and bone, though some copper objects have been found. Pottery from the Ubaid period is simple but recognisable. Grey, green or buff-coloured, often painted with dark geometric lines. The Haji Muhammad variant includes rows of diagonal slashes and dots. Sometimes the vessels were wide-mouthed with narrow bases, sometimes squat and round. A few bore stylized birds or fish. No writing system has been linked directly to the Ubaid. Their clay tokens suggest record-keeping, but none bear proto-cuneiform signs. Some believe that the tall, thin buildings in their towns may have served administrative or religious functions. Others say these were granaries. One such structure in Eridu had alternating rows of reed and mud brick, and a floor coated in bitumen. The roof had long since collapsed. No artifacts inside gave a clear purpose. As the Ubaid culture spread, it moved northward. In northern Mesopotamia, traces appear in places like Tepegara and Tel Arpachia, but over time, the artifacts become thinner. The motifs change, local styles reassert themselves. By 3800 BCE, the Ubaid pattern fades almost entirely from the archaeological record. What follows is the Uruk period, marked by larger cities, centralized authority, and the emergence of writing. Uruk artifacts are grander. They carry cylinder seals, beveled rim bowls, and vast temples made from fired bricks. But the transition was not violent. There are no mass graves or burned layers to suggest conquest. The change was gradual, like silt carried downstream. A British Museum report from 1923 describes the Ubaid remains as persistent but without voice. A later analysis from the 1970s noted that Ubaid houses were similar across regions from Eridu to Gara, suggesting a unified cultural template, yet no shared language has been recovered. No oral traditions were preserved. In later Babylonian mythology, Eridu is remembered as the home of Enki, the god of wisdom, but nothing links Enki to the earlier temple layers. The Ubaid gods, if they had them, are unknown. A few scholars in the 1980s raised questions about the figurines. Why were they so stylized? Why did some show female figures with elongated heads and what appeared to be lizard-like features? Mainstream archaeology offers little speculation. The prevailing view is that these were symbolic forms, perhaps priestesses or mythical beings. Others suggest they were nothing more than artistic exaggerations. The Ubaid people left no explanation. Burial practices offer limited insight. Some graves contained modest goods, bowls, tools, ornaments. Others had none. Skeletons were often curled in fetal positions, placed in shallow pits. A few cemeteries showed evidence of grouping by age or gender, but most were disorganized. One site near Eridu revealed 3 small graves placed under a home's floor. The bodies were of children. There were no offerings. Genetic studies from the early 2000s have yet to isolate a clear Ubaid lineage. The populations of southern Iraq are genetically diverse, and millennia of migration have blurred lines of descent. Teeth and cranial remains from Ubaid burials show little that separates them from later Mesopotamian populations. The Ubaid skulls are not elongated in the natural sense. The figurines, it seems, were not portraits. Among the oddities of the Ubaid is their apparent lack of defensive structures. No walls have been found around Eridu or Tel al-Ubaid. Gates, fortifications and towers are all absent. This does not mean conflict never occurred, but there is no archaeological evidence of sustained warfare. Later Sumerian cities were built with walls. Akkad was said to be like a fortress, but the Ubaid lived in open layouts, their towns vulnerable, without moats or barricades. One of the final excavations at Eridu, conducted in the early 1990s, uncovered a level of building that had collapsed inward. Within the rubble were layers of ash and a scatter of burnt bone. A small vessel was found overturned, its paint flaked but still visible. No signs of battle were recorded. No iron weapons, no siege tools. Whatever caused the fire was not preserved. After that layer, the record grows silent. No text from later Mesopotamian periods refers directly to the Ubaid. The cities they built were reused, re-inhabited, and reconstructed, often many times. The name Ubaid itself comes from the mound near which the culture was first identified. It is not what they called themselves. That name is lost. The figurines are kept in drawers and cabinets in museums in Baghdad and London. Few are on permanent display. Labels describe them as early anthropomorphic type, or proto-cultic object. One, housed at the British Museum, was never catalogued formally. It sits in storage. Its face is worn. Its hands rest on its knees. No record tells where it was found. No translation has ever been proposed. The ghost cities of the Indus Delta. In 1922, excavation began at a site called Mohenjo-Daro, located near the Indus River in what is now southern Pakistan. The archaeologists found broad streets laid out in a grid, lined with baked brick structures some 2 stories high. Wells were sunken into courtyards. Drains ran beneath the roads. There was a structure later labelled the Great Bath, consisting of finely sealed brickwork and a watertight pool. What they were uncovering was one of the major cities of the Indus Valley civilization, a culture that once stretched across more than 1.2 million square kilometres from the Makran coast to the Ganges plain. But far south, where the Indus meets the Arabian Sea, archaeologists uncovered another class of ruins. Smaller, often eroded, partially buried in silt or overgrown with salt-tolerant shrubs. Places like Dolavira, Lakwinjodaro and Sutkegandor. Some barely showed outlines of rooms, others had low walls marked by shells and bits of pottery. These were once part of a coastal network of the same civilization, but over time, they disappeared. They are now part of the vanished delta settlements, sites whose names, functions and populations are no longer known. The Indus Valley civilization, also called the Harappan civilization, flourished between 2600 BCE and 1900 BCE. Over 1,000 sites have been identified, yet the majority of them remain unexcavated. In the Delta region, seasonal flooding, rising salinity and erosion have wiped away much of the surface evidence. Remote sensing has identified possible city grids under farmland and mudflats. Local farmers occasionally report pottery shards, broken terracotta figurines, or fired bricks while digging wells. These fragments often go uncollected. One of the lesser-known delta sites is Kuntasi, located near the coast of modern Gujarat. Excavations revealed warehouses and a dockyard-like structure, suggesting it functioned as a port. Storage rooms contain narrow passages and platforms. No inscriptions were found. Some bronze tools and etched carnelian beads were recovered. There is no record of who governed the site. No palace, no royal tomb. Some of the rooms had hearths, others were empty. Another forgotten site is Nagashwar, located on the edge of a dried creek bed. Here, a large number of shell bangles were found, along with tools used for cutting and polishing shell. No written label describes the site's purpose, but researchers believe it was involved in shell ornament production. The site is now surrounded by fishing villages. The foundations remain exposed during the dry season. During the monsoon, they vanish underwater. The Indus script has never been deciphered. Thousands of small seals have been found across the civilization's span, including at some of the southernmost sites. The symbols are carved into steatite or copper tablets, typically a line of script above an image of a bull, elephant or composite creature. None of these seals provide long inscriptions. Most have only 5 to 10 symbols. No bilingual inscriptions have been found, like the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some scholars believe the seals represent names or administrative tokens. Others propose a ritual or religious function, but there is no consensus. No readable history survives. In a 1987 excavation report, researchers at Lothal, a site not far from the vanished delta towns, suggested that trade goods may have moved by boat along ancient canals and rivers. The ruins of a brick-lined basin, once called a dockyard, lie near a silted water channel. Its original depth is unknown. Some believe it held water during the rainy season and allowed flat-bottomed boats to unload cargo. Others say it may have been a reservoir. No boats have been recovered. The wood would have decayed long ago. Salt crystallization has damaged many of the remaining brick structures. In places where the ground has become alkaline, bricks crumble into powder. Walls collapse. No restoration efforts are active in the remote delta settlements. Locals sometimes remove bricks to use in modern construction. Some layers of ancient occupation have been buried beneath roads and buildings. Others lie exposed, softening each year from wind and flood. In the 1930s, a British archaeologist named Ernest Mackay surveyed a group of low mounds near the coast. He wrote that the site showed traces of a people, organised yet unnamed. A few ceramic pots were collected, red ware with black painted lines typical of late Harappan design. Some bore motifs of fish, trees, or wavy lines. None were inscribed. The site, listed as Mound 14B in his notes, has since disappeared beneath cultivated land. Among the more puzzling features of the Indus cities, whether large like Mohenjo-Daro or small like Kuntasi, is the absence of grand monuments. There are no pyramids, no temples, no statues of rulers. Public architecture focused on practicality, drainage, bathing, granaries. Houses were standardized in size, often with a central courtyard. Some had latrines connected to a sewer. This emphasis on hygiene is rare in ancient cities, yet there are no clear signs of centralized kingship, no royal inscriptions, no heroic statues. In the southern settlements, the same principles applied. Dolavira had water reservoirs carved from bedrock. Stone pillars once held up gateways. At Surkotada, horse bones were found in later layers, but their identification remains debated. The city layouts were ordered, but not defensive. No massive fortresses or citadels dominate the terrain. Some outer walls exist, but they are modest. Between 1900 BCE and 1700 BCE, the cities of the Indus began to decline. Trade links with Mesopotamia faded. Urban centres were gradually abandoned. In the delta, the sea level may have changed. River paths shifted, canals filled with silt, agricultural land turned saline. No single cause explains the change. Drought, resource depletion, disease, or social transformation have all been suggested. The written script falls silent, Sites become rural, pottery styles shift, house plans change, the seals disappear. In 2002, a group of Indian archaeologists excavated a small site near the estuary of the Nara River. They found baked bricks arranged in a rectangular platform, along with terracotta weights and a broken copper pin. Charred grain was recovered from a hearth. Radiocarbon dating placed it at around 2100 BCE. No settlement name survives. The mound is now unnamed. Satellite imagery reveals the ghost paths of old riverbeds and canal lines. Some pass near known ruins, others vanish into marshland. These networks may have once connected the coastal settlements, supporting a system of trade or irrigation. Now they're dry or submerged. The original geography has changed. Where the delta once flowed freely, channels are now blocked or evaporated. Reports from the early 21st century describe how local residents in parts of Sindh have uncovered potsherds while ploughing fields. Some pieces show floral motifs, others are plain. The residents often discard them. No formal collection system is in place. Some villages are built atop ancient mounds, unaware of what lies below. A 2016 ground-penetrating radar survey near the town of Bardin detected regular stone foundations beneath several kilometres of sediment. No excavation followed. The site remains unconfirmed. A small cluster of fired bricks was observed at the surface. The rest remains buried. As modern cities grow, some ancient ruins are destroyed. Others are preserved by accident, forgotten due to remoteness. The southern Indus settlements, once connected to a wider civilization, now exist only in fragments. Their names are not written, their builders are unknown, their end left no record. The disappearance of the Tartessians. In 1923, along the banks of the Guadalquivir River in southwestern Spain, workers digging a drainage channel unearthed fragments of metalwork. Decorative pieces formed in geometric patterns covered in green patina. Some were simple clasps, others were parts of bowls or ornamental discs. The artifacts were sent to the Museo Arqueológico Nacional in Madrid, where they were catalogued under an uncertain label, Tartessian. It was a word pulled from classical texts used by Greek and Roman writers to describe a people who lived in the far west of the known world. The name Tartessos first appeared in Greek records around the 7th century BCE. The geographer and historian Herodotus described it as a prosperous kingdom with a legendary king named Argentonios. The name means man of silver, though no one knows if it was his real name or a symbolic title. According to Herodotus, Argentonios ruled for 80 years and welcomed Greek traders. He reportedly offered them help in building walls to protect their city from Persian invasion. No direct account of Tartessian speech, laws, or customs survives. Archaeological evidence points to a distinct culture that developed in the region between 900 BCE and 500 BCE. The core area stretched across the modern provinces of Huelva, Cadiz, and Seville. Settlements were located near river mouths, estuaries, and mineral-rich hills. The Tartessians worked extensively with metals, especially silver, copper, and gold. They built rectangular buildings with mud brick walls, often reinforced with stone. Hearths, altars, and storage jars have been uncovered. Yet no city plan has been fully excavated. Most sites exist as mounds, interrupted by farmland or modern development. The Tartessian script is only partially understood. It uses an early semi-syllabic writing system, sometimes called the Southwestern script. Inscriptions have been found on stones, pottery, and lead plaques. The characters resemble both Phoenician and later Iberian forms. Linguists cannot yet translate the language behind the symbols. It appears to be non-Indo-European and non-Semitic. Around 90 known inscriptions have been discovered. Many are short, just a few words. None explain events or history. At the site of Casas del Turuñuelo, located in the province of Badajoz, archaeologists found a large rectangular building with a central courtyard. Inside were painted walls, burnt beams, and layers of animal bones, mostly horses, many carefully arranged. This may have been a ceremonial structure. Among the remains were ivory combs, metal weapons, and small bronze statues. Radiocarbon dating places the destruction of the site around the 6th century BCE. The cause is unknown. No battle debris was found. No inscriptions were left behind. Greek records refer to Tartessos as a place of wealth, known especially for silver. The region around Rio Tinto and Sierra Morena was rich in mineral deposits. Smelting installations have been found near ancient roads. Slag heaps suggest industrial-scale production. The Tartessians likely traded metals with Phoenician and Greek merchants. Amphophore and imported ceramics appear in several Tartessian layers, yet despite this contact, few local texts were created. Cultural exchange was uneven. The Tartessians adopted foreign goods but left few written accounts. Phoenician colonies along the Iberian coast, such as Gardia, modern Cadiz, likely interacted frequently with Tartessian settlements. Some Tartessian artifacts show clear Phoenician influence, such as motifs of sphinxes, winged bulls and lotus flowers. But the Tartessians did not build in the same style. Their buildings remained earthbound, with thick walls and flat roofs. No temples survive, no fortresses have been confirmed. In 1958, a hoard of silver objects was found near the village of Aliseda. Among them were bracelets, torques, and bowls with finely worked patterns. Some pieces bore animal designs, others were abstract. The craftsmanship indicated a high degree of technical skill. No owner's name was inscribed. The hoard had been placed in a ceramic jar and buried. Whether it was a ritual offering, a hidden treasure, or something else is unknown. By the 5th century BCE, mentions of Tartessos in Greek records vanish. The archaeological sites begin to show signs of abandonment or destruction. Some suggest that Carthaginian expansion along the Iberian coast led to Tartessos' decline. Others propose internal collapse, perhaps due to overexploitation of resources, loss of trade networks, or social upheaval. No written explanation survives. The cities were not rebuilt. The script stopped appearing. Cultural continuity breaks. The tomb of La Joya, discovered in Huelva in the 1970s, contained a burial chamber lined with stone slabs. The grave goods included gold jewellery, bronze weapons, and imported pottery. A decorative fibula bore enamel inlays. A small carved head, possibly ivory, was placed near the remains. The identity of the buried individual is unknown. No inscription named them. No title was preserved. Later Iberian cultures developed different scripts and customs. The Iberians and Celtiberians, who emerged in the centuries that followed, showed no direct continuation of Tartessian traditions. Some elements, such as metalworking techniques, may have carried over, but the cities were gone. The people who built them no longer wrote. The Tartessian language remains unclassified. Linguists disagree on its possible roots. Some propose a link to Etruscan, others suggest a pre-Indo-European substratum. With only short inscriptions and no bilingual texts, translation is speculative. The longest known text, carved into a stone stele near the village of Fontevela, contains just over 24 symbols. It has not been interpreted. In the early 2000s, aerial surveys identified geometric patterns beneath the soil near the town of Hinojos. Ground inspection revealed pottery fragments and stone alignments. The site is not excavated. Local development plans threaten the area. The patterns match what might be a grid of streets or building foundations. If they are Tartessian, they may represent one of the lost urban centres. A bronze plaque discovered near Badajoz bears symbols arranged in a grid. Some repeat, others appear only once. The object was pierced, suggesting it may have been worn or hung. The meaning of the inscription is unknown. The context of the find was disturbed, so no layer can date it with certainty. The writing does not match any neighbouring script. The Greek explorer Euthymenes reportedly sailed beyond the Pillars of Heracles and described a land of abundant fish and dark waters. He did not name Tartessos directly, but later writers associated his journey with the far west. No maps from the Tartessian period survive, no ports have been identified. Their ships, if they had any, are lost. Stone walls at the site of Cancho Roano show signs of scorching. The building appears to have been set on fire intentionally. Excavations in the 1990s revealed ceremonial objects, a red-painted altar, and scattered animal remains. The structure was buried beneath a layer of compacted earth. There is no sign it was reoccupied. In the 1st century CE, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder mentioned Tartessos as a river, not a city. Later scholars confused it with other names, like Turdetania or Baetica. But these referred to different peoples under Roman rule. The original Tartessians were gone. Their names did not appear in Roman records, their script was not adopted, their language was not translated. In 2017, a research team using magnetometry near the Donyana National Park found subsurface anomalies. Rectangular forms, aligned in rows, appeared beneath sediment layers. The shapes resembled building foundations. Some researchers speculated these might be linked to Tartessian settlements submerged by ancient flooding. Others warned against overinterpretation. No excavation followed. The forms remain beneath layers of marshland. No Tartessian chronicle was ever written. No king list was preserved. No epic poem told of their origins or their fall. What remains are small traces, buried hoards, burned walls, fragments of script. The culture appears, flourishes, and disappears within a few centuries. The reasons are not recorded. The vanishing of the Liangzhu culture. In 1936, a Chinese scholar named Shi Xinggeng unearthed a polished jade axe from the banks of the Yangtze River, near the village of Liangzhu in Zhejiang province. The object had no rust, no chisel marks, and no practical wear. Its surface was smooth, shaped into a precise rectangle with an aperture in the centre. Later finds would show the same motif repeated in dozens of forms: circular discs, square tubes, and ceremonial blades, all made from jade, all buried with care. This was the first recognised evidence of the Liangzhu culture, a society that thrived more than 5,000 years ago and then vanished without record. The Liangzhu culture developed between 3,300 BCE and 2,300 BCE in the Yangtze River Delta. Its settlements spread across low-lying plains, riverbanks, and marshes. Excavations over the last century have revealed large town sites, water control systems, tomb complexes, and artifacts that suggest a high degree of social organisation. But no written language has been found. The Liangzhu left no inscriptions, no lists, no myths. At the core of the culture was a city at Mojiaoshan, which may have functioned as a central administrative or ritual hub. The site included a raised platform nearly 10 metres high, surrounded by a system of artificial dikes and channels. Sediment analysis confirmed that the raised areas were man-made, constructed from layers of earth, shell, and broken pottery. Structures atop the platform included wooden buildings, some of which may have served as elite residences or ceremonial spaces. The wood has long since decayed, but post holes remain. The most distinctive aspect of Liangzhu material culture is its jade. Craftsmen shaped nephrite into forms like the kong, a square tube with a circular bore, and the bai, a flat disc with a central hole. These objects are found primarily in high-status burials. The surfaces are often carved with abstract patterns, parallel lines, facial motifs, and stylized masks with symmetrical eyes and mouths. The function of these objects is unclear. They show no signs of wear or use. They may have held religious or symbolic significance, but the absence of writing prevents any precise interpretation. One burial at Fanshan, a site within the Liangzhu cultural area, revealed an individual interred with over 40 jade artifacts. The body was laid on a wooden platform surrounded by lacquered containers, stone tools, and silk remnants. The burial pit was lined with wooden planks sealed by layers of soil. No name was preserved. The arrangement suggests hierarchical social structure. Other nearby graves were smaller, with fewer goods. In 2019, researchers published findings from excavations around Mojiaoshan that revealed an extensive hydraulic system. Channels, dams, and levees had been constructed to manage water across more than 300 square kilometres. Radiocarbon dating placed the construction between 3100 BCE and 2500 BCE. The system likely served multiple functions: flood control, irrigation, and transport. The scale of the project suggests coordinated labour and centralised planning, yet no palace or ruling residence has been identified. The builders remain anonymous. Pottery from Liangzhu sites is typically black, grey or brown. Many vessels were wheel-made with thin walls and regular shapes. Decoration was minimal, usually plain or with incised lines. Some pots had high legs or pedestal bases. A few pieces showed burnishing or red slip. Stone tools included axes, chisels and adzes, many of which were finely ground. Some were purely functional. Others, like the jade axes, were too fragile for use and appear ceremonial. Animal bones from Liangzhu sites indicate domestication of pigs, dogs, and water buffalo. Rice remains are abundant. Fields in the surrounding lowlands were likely used for wet rice agriculture. Pollen samples confirm the presence of cultivated fields and secondary forests. Shell middens near settlements suggest that riverine and estuarine resources were also exploited. Fishing tools made from bone and shell have been recovered. Nets and baskets, if used, have not survived. The Liangzhu people also crafted items from wood, lacquer, silk and bamboo, though most organic materials have decomposed. A few preserved wooden objects were found in the waterlogged contexts, fragments of containers, tools and textile equipment. In one burial, the outline of a wooden coffin was visible, surrounded by copper ornaments and jade pendants. The occupant's bones had dissolved in the acidic soil. No human image was left. Around 2300 BCE, Liangzhu sites were suddenly abandoned. There are no signs of war, no mass graves, no burn layers. The cities were not razed, they were vacated. Sediment cores from the region indicate that a series of catastrophic floods occurred around this time. Layers of sand and silt overlay settlement strata, suggesting sudden inundation. Some channels were clogged, levees collapsed, the hydraulic system failed. Climatological studies link this period to a shift in the Asian monsoon. Precipitation levels rose dramatically. Torrential rains may have overwhelmed the water management system. Fields flooded, structures washed away, low-lying settlements became uninhabitable. The population may have dispersed northward or inland, but no migration record exists. No new city arose to replace Liangzhu. Chinese historical texts from later periods make no mention of Liangzhu. The earliest recorded dynasties, Xia, Shang, Zhou, developed in the Yellow River Basin, hundreds of kilometers to the north. Bronze metallurgy, oracle bones and early Chinese writing emerged in a separate context. The Liangzhu did not leave descendants who wrote down their story. Their memory did not survive in legend. The jade forms used by the Liangzhu, especially the Kong and Bi, were adopted and transformed by later cultures. In Shang and Zhou burials, similar objects appear, but with different stylistic traits. Whether this represents continuity or coincidence is unknown. There is no known link between the artisans of Liangzhu and those of the Shang. The techniques may have been rediscovered independently. A 2021 excavation at the site of Yoshan, located near the core Liangzhu area, revealed a burial platform surrounded by concentric ditches. The outer ditch was filled with clean clay, suggesting intentional sealing. Inside were fragments of jade, charred wood and ash. The structure had been burned. Whether as part of a ritual or due to disaster is unclear. The layout resembled a symbolic centre, a place of gathering or separation. No text explained its function. The Liangzhu script, if it ever existed, is not preserved. A few pottery sherds show scratched marks, but none repeat with enough regularity to form an alphabet or syllabary. Some researchers have proposed that the Liangzhu may have used perishable writing systems on wood, silk, or bamboo. No evidence supports this directly. The marks may be potters' notations or symbols with no linguistic function. Archaeological attention to Liangzhu increased in the late 20th century, but preservation remains a challenge. Urban expansion in the Yangtze Delta has destroyed several sites. Roads, factories and farms now cover ancient mounds. Protective measures are limited. In some cases, knowledge of a site comes only from old field notes, stored artifacts and maps that no longer correspond to the landscape. In 2018, UNESCO designated the Liangzhu archaeological site as a World Heritage Site. This recognition brought international attention, but much of the civilization's story remains buried. Without texts, legends or living memory, its reconstruction relies on careful excavation and inference. The material remains precise, geometric and silent. There are no songs from Liangzhu, no names of kings or priests, no carved histories on stone, just jade objects placed beside vanished bodies, fragments of pottery, outlines of buildings and water channels that no longer flow, the obscured kingdom of Aratta. In 1961, an archaeological team working in the Zagros Mountains near the Iranian plateau uncovered fragments of pottery bearing unique patterns, concentric lines and abstract motifs not typically associated with known Mesopotamian or Elamite cultures. The site was small, located near Shaddad, where the desert meets the mountains. Among the finds was a carved stone seal depicting a mountain, a man with a staff, and a cluster of dots arranged in rows. It was filed away in museum records under an uncertain label. The team noted the resemblance to a long-lost place described in ancient Sumerian texts, Aratta. The name Aratta appears in Sumerian literature beginning in the 3rd millennium BCE. It is most frequently mentioned in epic texts such as in Merka and the Lord of Aratta and Lugalbanda in the Mountain Cave. These poems describe Aratta as a distant land, rich in precious stones, gold and lapis lazuli. It is also described as mountainous and difficult to reach, requiring a journey over 7 mountain passes. The city is never placed on a map. No coordinates are given. The texts are not historical accounts. They are stories. But they repeat one name, Aratta. In Merka, the king of Uruk is said to have demanded submission from Aratta. In the stories, he sends a messenger with gifts and incantations. The Lord of Aratta resists but is eventually persuaded. The exchange includes riddles, magical words, and the invention of writing to carry messages over distance. The poems are among the earliest examples of written literature in the world, but whether Aratta was a real place remains uncertain. No ruins have been conclusively linked to it. Some archaeologists have proposed that Aratta might have been located in what is now western Iran. Sites such as Jiroft, Shardad, and Tepe Yahya have yielded artifacts that differ in style from Mesopotamian finds, yet date to the same period. At Jiroft, stone vessels carved from chlorite depict animals, architectural motifs, and human figures. Many include step structures or ziggurat-like buildings, though no such structures have been excavated. The chlorite vessels suggest a distinct artistic tradition. The iconography is unfamiliar. In 2001, floods in the Halil River Valley near Jiroft exposed a series of burial mounds. Unauthorized digging followed. Thousands of artifacts surfaced in black markets. Eventually, formal excavations began. Archaeologists recovered cylinder seals, inscribed tablets, and metal objects. Some of the tablets bore a form of writing unlike Sumerian cuneiform. The script has not been deciphered. It may represent an independent writing system. No bilingual texts have been found. The contents of the inscriptions remain unknown. The people who lived in the Halil Valley built multi-roomed mud brick buildings. Some had central courtyards. Burial sites included jewellery, weapons, and ritual items. There were no grand palaces, no monumental inscriptions, but the density of artifacts suggests a population with trade connections. Lapis lazuli, a blue stone sourced from Afghanistan, appears frequently. So do carnelian beads, copper tools, and traces of bitumen. The economy may have been based on craft production and long-distance trade. Sumerian texts refer to Aratta as a source of raw materials. These include not only stones and metals, but also artisans capable of producing fine goods. The texts imply competition between Aratta and Sumer, particularly over cultural supremacy. In one version of the tale, the gods are asked to choose which city should receive their favour. Uruk is favoured in the end. Aratta fades from the narrative. No king list includes Aratta. It is not mentioned in administrative texts or trade records. Its ruler is never named outside of the epics. The location of the kingdom remains speculative. Some scholars have argued that Aratta was entirely mythical, a poetic device used to contrast the known world with the unknown. Others believe it referred to a real place that was eventually forgotten, absorbed, or destroyed. At Tepeyaya, located further east in Kerman province, excavators found pottery kilns, workshops, and storerooms. Artifacts included stone bowls, incised tablets, and copper tools. The layout of the settlement suggests organised labour and specialised craft, yet no signs of a state-level society were identified. There were no city walls, no monumental buildings. The inhabitants left no texts identifying themselves. The name Aratta does not appear. One theory places Aratta in the Armenian highlands, based on references to mountains and long journeys. Another locates it in Baluchistan, near the Makran coast. Some proposals reach as far as the Indus Valley, but each theory faces the same problem. No site has been found that combines the characteristics described in the Sumerian epics with physical evidence of a developed kingdom. The stone seals found near Shaddad show a mix of Mesopotamian and local motifs. One depicts a lion attacking a deer, another shows rows of birds. These seals may have been used for trade, property marking, or ritual. They are dated to around 2400 BCE. The craftsmanship is skilled. The symbols are unfamiliar. A burial at Shardad revealed a bronze mirror, a wooden comb, and a necklace of turquoise beads. The skeleton was of an adult woman. Her grave was shallow, the bones partially disturbed by erosion. No written name was left. The items suggest a degree of wealth, but no structure was found nearby. The grave lay alone in the desert. The Girofte tablets remain among the most enigmatic artifacts of the region. The writing consists of lines, wedges, and geometric forms arranged in horizontal bands. Some tablets show repeating patterns, others are irregular. The material is often clay, occasionally stone. Preservation varies. Without a known language or context, the script is unreadable. Its purpose remains unknown. In the story of Enmerkar and Aratta, one passage describes the building of a temple. The materials, stone, wood, metal, must come from Aratta. The narrative emphasizes the movement of goods, the difficulty of terrain, and the role of divine will. It is unclear whether this reflects actual trade or symbolic storytelling. No temple linked to Aratta has been identified archaeologically. In 2014, a team using satellite imagery surveyed parts of the Dasht-i-Lut Desert. Anomalies in the surface pattern suggested buried structures. Field visits confirmed the presence of stone alignments and compacted soil layers. No excavation has taken place. The region is remote and largely uninhabited. The forms may be natural, or they may belong to a forgotten settlement. No artifacts have been recovered. The mountains referenced in the Sumerian epics remain unidentified. The 7 passes may have symbolic meaning, or they may correspond to actual geographic obstacles. Travel between Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau was difficult in antiquity. Caravans followed narrow valleys, moving slowly with goods and animals. Some routes are still visible as worn tracks in the hills. In Susa, the ancient Elamite capital, scribes wrote in multiple scripts, but none mention Aratta. Elamite records focus on their own cities, rulers, and conflicts. The silence is notable. If Aratta traded with Mesopotamia, the Elamites may have known of it, yet no record survives. The notion of a kingdom that produced art, writing, and wealth, but left no durable record, raises questions. Was Aratta erased? Was it absorbed? Did it decline gradually or vanish suddenly? The archaeological record is incomplete. The names, if written, have not been translated. In the museum storerooms of Tehran, stone bowls from Girofte sit beside chlorite vessels from Shaddad. Labels describe them as 3rd millennium artifacts. None bear the name Aratta, but their makers, their trade, and their disappearance remain consistent with the outlines of the Sumerian tale, the lost fortresses of the Oxus civilization. In 1976, Soviet archaeologists excavating in southern Turkmenistan uncovered the ruins of a walled settlement near the village of Gonur-Tepe. What they found challenged earlier assumptions about the civilizations of Central Asia. Beneath the desert soil were mud brick fortifications, rectangular courtyards, and carefully planned canals. The structures did not belong to the Persians, Scythians, or Greeks. They were older, much older. Over the following decades, similar sites were found scattered across the Murghab River delta. Together they formed what would later be called the Bactria-Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC. Another name emerged from scholarly literature, the Oxus civilization. The Oxus civilization flourished between 2300 BCE and 1700 BCE. Its settlements stretched across modern Turkmenistan, northern Afghanistan, southern Uzbekistan, and parts of Tajikistan. The core area was centered along the now arid delta of the Murghab River, which once flowed into the Karakum Desert. At its height, the civilization supported dozens of fortified settlements. Each had thick outer walls, rectangular layouts, and internal subdivisions that suggest administration and ritual activity. No written records from the Oxus people survive. Their language, names, and belief systems are unknown. The city of Gonur-Tepe remains the best studied site. It included a central fortress with high walls, corner towers, and a layout based on intersecting rectangles. Excavators identified residential areas, storage rooms, workshops, and what appears to be a temple. In the centre of the complex was a structure later called the Royal Necropolis. This area contained over 200 graves. The dead were buried with ceramic vessels, bronze mirrors, animal bones, and ornaments made of gold, silver, and semi-precious stones. Some bodies were placed in wooden coffins, others were cremated. The pattern was not consistent. Artifacts from the Oxus civilization show fine craftsmanship. Pottery was wheel-made, often painted in black or red geometric designs. Stone vessels were carved from chlorite or alabaster. Tools included flint blades, copper chisels, and bronze daggers. Jewellery incorporated carnelian, lapis lazuli, and turquoise. One notable find from Togolok 21, another settlement in the region, was a small ivory comb with fine teeth and incise decoration. No inscriptions have been identified on any of these objects. Among the more enigmatic features of the Oxus sites are the fire altars. These were circular or rectangular platforms, often built from mud brick with evidence of repeated burning. Ash layers, burnt bone fragments, and traces of oil have been found in their vicinity. Some scholars interpret them as ritual installations, others suggest domestic or industrial uses. No consensus exists. The same altars appear at multiple sites across the region, including Dashli, Sapali Tepe, and Altindipi. The architecture of the Oxus settlements is both uniform and adaptable. Most sites follow a standard plan: walled perimeters, corner towers, and gridded interiors. Yet local variations exist. In the Murghab Delta, buildings are made of sun-dried brick and rest on raised platforms to avoid seasonal flooding. In the hill regions, stones were used more frequently. At Shortagai, located on the Amu Darya River in northern Afghanistan, a canal was discovered leading to a small walled settlement. The site contained pottery identical to that of Gonur Tepe. Trade routes likely connected these distant outposts. Excavations at Keleli, a small fortified site, uncovered evidence of craft production. Kilns, moulds, and slag indicate metallurgy. Bead-making tools and fragments of unfinished ornaments suggest specialization. The artifacts are similar to those found in the Indus Valley and Elamite regions. Lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, tin from Central Asia, and shells from the Indian Ocean suggest long-distance exchange. The Oxus civilization was not isolated. Despite its scale, the Oxus civilization left no written language. Clay tablets, seal impressions, and pictographic inscriptions, common in contemporary Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, are absent. A few cylinder seals were recovered, but they show abstract patterns or animal motifs, not readable texts. The absence of writing has limited understanding of the civilization's political structure, belief system, and internal organization. The economy of the Oxus civilization appears to have been mixed. Irrigation canals supported agriculture in the delta. Remains of wheat, barley, grapes, and legumes have been found. Animal bones include sheep, goat, cattle, and camel. Hunting likely supplemented the diet. Storage facilities contained large jars, grinding stones, and piles of seeds. The layout of some settlements suggests controlled access to resources. Entrances were guarded, gates were narrow. The burial customs vary across the region. At Gonur Tepe, some graves are richly furnished, others are plain. The orientation of bodies differs. Some are flexed, others extended. A few individuals were buried with horses or carts. One grave contained a woman adorned with gold earrings, shell bracelets, and a mirror placed near her head. No identifying marks were present. The meaning of the grave goods remained speculative. In 2006, a remote sensing survey revealed the outlines of multiple walled settlements buried under layers of desert sediment. These ghost cities, now invisible at ground level, once formed a network of population centres. Satellite images show faint rectangles, remnants of forgotten walls. Ground verification has been limited due to terrain and political instability. Some sites are located in uninhabited zones with no modern infrastructure. The collapse of the Oxus civilization remains unexplained. Around 1700 BCE, the settlements were gradually abandoned. No evidence of violent destruction has been found. Walls were not breached. Temples were not burned. Instead, the structures were left intact. Roofs decayed. Rooms filled with sand. Canals dried. Some scholars suggest climate change, a shift in river patterns, reduction in rainfall, or desertification. Others propose social reorganization, integration into neighboring cultures, or gradual depopulation. There is no clear successor. Later cultures in the region, such as the Achaemenids and Kushans, do not mention the Oxus cities. Greek and Persian records refer to Bactria and Margiana, but centuries later. The memory of the earlier civilization did not persist in written history. Its buildings were buried, its name was not preserved. Genetic studies from skeletal remains suggest a diverse population. Some individuals show affinities with steppe populations, others with Iranian plateau groups. The Oxus civilization may have served as a cultural crossroads. The diversity of artifacts supports this, but without written evidence, the internal structure remains unknown. In the museum at Ashgabat, a reconstructed fire altar from Gonur Tepe stands behind glass. It is a circular platform darkened with ash. Nearby, display cases hold ceramic bowls, bronze pins, and stone weights. Labels describe them as Middle Bronze Age, Oxus culture. None bear names, none explain rituals. The silence is preserved. A 2020 excavation near Buston revealed a collapsed building filled with charred grain, ceramic shards, and a single copper sickle. No bodies were found. The structure had fallen inward. The grain was carbonized. The layer was sealed by windblown sediment. The site is remote. No road leads there. The nearest village is 2 hours away on foot. Efforts to protect and document the Oxus sites face challenges. Looting, erosion, and unregulated development have destroyed parts of ancient walls. Some mounds are mined for clay, others are flattened for agriculture. Many known sites have not been excavated. Their contents remain undisturbed. The Oxus civilization existed in parallel with the Akkadians, the Indus Valley, and the Old Kingdom of Egypt. It interacted, traded, and built. But it did not write. Its words, if spoken, are gone. Its beliefs are unknown. Its cities stand beneath the sand, aligned in silence. The Forgotten Temples of the Hittite Periphery. In 1957, during a survey of the Upper Euphrates region in southeastern Turkey, archaeologists recorded a cluster of large stone blocks partially embedded in a hillside near the village of Arslantepe. Some of the blocks bore shallow relief carvings, geometric shapes, stylized animals, and what appeared to be seated human figures. The site had been disturbed by modern construction and grazing, but deeper layers revealed the remains of a complex architectural structure. The excavation continued for decades. Beneath the layers of soil and later occupation, researchers found traces of a ceremonial centre built thousands of years ago, associated with a culture that predated and possibly rivaled the early Hittites. The city's name, if it had one, was not recorded. The Hittite Empire, known from texts dating to the 2nd millennium BCE, dominated central Anatolia and expanded into northern Syria. Its capital, Hattusa, has been extensively excavated. Cuneiform tablets found there detail military campaigns, treaties, and royal decrees. But on the fringes of this empire, particularly in the eastern highlands and borderlands, there were settlements with monumental architecture that were not fully integrated into the Hittite writing system or bureaucracy. These sites include Arslantepe, Noshuntepe, and Pulur. They are often labelled as peripheral or transitional cultures. Their builders remain unnamed. At Arslantepe, excavators identified a large mud brick structure with painted walls and a raised platform. The building dated to around 3300 BCE, before the establishment of the Hittite state. Inside the structure, a cache of bronze weapons and administrative tools was found. Clay ceilings with geometric impressions had been used to close containers or doors. Some bore symbols, others were blank. No written texts were found in the earliest layers. Further excavations uncovered a set of rooms with red-painted walls, white-plastered floors, and evidence of ritual activity. In one chamber, a large stone basin sat beside a hearth. Ash, charred bone, and pottery fragments were found nearby. Another room contained a platform of stone slabs with a channel that may have carried liquid. The function of these spaces remains uncertain. The layout does not match later Hittite temples. There is no evidence of a pantheon or prescribed liturgy. The rituals, if any, were not recorded. At Noshuntepe, located further north, excavations revealed a fortified settlement with a central hall and a series of storage buildings. The architecture included long corridors, stone foundations, and baked brick paving. Metallurgical activity was evident. Slags, crucibles, and moulds were found in multiple locations. The site was destroyed by fire around 2000 BCE. Burned layers preserved parts of wooden beams and charred grain. A group of bronze pins was found in a collapsed storage room. No names were written on them. Pulur, near modern Erzincan, consisted of terraced buildings arranged around a central platform. Pottery styles suggest contact with both Eastern, Anatolian and Northern Mesopotamian cultures. Decorative motifs include incised spirals, cross-hatching and animal figures. Figurines recovered from the site show stylized human forms, broad hips, extended arms, minimal facial detail. They resemble figures from earlier Neolithic sites but are found in contexts dated to the early Bronze Age. Their purpose is unknown. The builders of these sites possessed knowledge of masonry, metalwork, and large-scale planning. They constructed defensive walls, storage complexes, and ceremonial enclosures. Some structures used stone orthostats, upright slabs carved with reliefs. Others employed plaster and paint for interior decoration. But they left no inscriptions. The absence of a writing system or adopted script has obscured their identity. Hittite records rarely mention these sites. When they do, the references are vague. In one Hittite tablet, a place called Izuwa is described as lying beyond the eastern mountains. It is not clear whether Izuwa referred to a city, a region, or a tribal group. Some scholars associate it with the upper Euphrates region, where Arslan Tepe is located. But no definitive link has been established. Izuwa does not appear on surviving maps. Its boundaries are not defined. Trade items from these settlements include obsidian, copper, tin, and lapis lazuli. The distribution of materials suggests a network of exchange reaching into the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, and the Iranian plateau. Ceramic analysis indicates shared styles across sites, though with regional variations. Common forms include high-necked jars, bowls with flared rims, and storage vessels with loop handles. Decorative techniques include slipping, burnishing, and incision. Few vessels carry symbolic imagery. In 1970, a subterranean chamber was uncovered at Arslan Tepe. Inside were 5 human skeletons positioned side by side. No grave goods were present. The chamber had been sealed with large stones. The bones showed no signs of trauma. The burial context was unusual, more formal than domestic, yet lacking the markers of elite tombs. The identities of the individuals remain unknown. Their placement suggests intentionality but offers no further insight. Stone tools and flint blades recovered from the site indicate ongoing use of traditional technologies alongside emerging metallurgy. Bronze tools include axes, chisels, and awls. Some show signs of wear, others appear unused. A few ceremonial axes were inlaid with silver or gold. One axe head bore a line of dots along its edge. No accompanying text explained its symbolism. In the later phases of occupation at Arslan Tepe, elements of Hittite culture begin to appear: pottery styles, architectural forms, and administrative tools. Cuneiform tablets appear in small numbers, but they are fragmentary and limited to short economic entries. They do not reference the city's earlier history. The continuity between the early builders and later inhabitants is uncertain. Flood deposits and erosion have damaged parts of these sites. Preservation efforts are uneven. Some buildings have been covered with protective shelters, others remain exposed. Looting in the 1990s damaged several layers at Pulur. Reconstruction efforts are ongoing, but funding is limited. The peripheral temple cultures of eastern Anatolia existed in parallel with the rise of early Mesopotamian city-states and the development of Egyptian dynasties. They shared technological traits but followed different cultural paths. Their art is distinct, their architecture is geometric and modular, their burials are variable, but without writing, their internal structures remain speculative. In 2010, a new excavation at Arslan Tepe uncovered a painted corridor lined with vertical red and white bands. The paint had faded but was still visible under filtered light. Footprints were embedded in the floor plaster. Soil samples contained charcoal, lime, and traces of crushed bone. The corridor may have served as a processional route. No icons were found. The walls carried no images. Artifacts from these forgotten temples are now housed in regional museums. Display labels describe them as early Anatolian, pre-Hittite, or unknown origin. Stone figurines rest in glass cases beside potsherds and bronze blades. No names accompany them. No date is written in their own words. Satellite imagery has identified more mounds along the Euphrates and Tigris headwaters. Many remain unexcavated. Their size and shape suggest planned settlements. Their contents are hidden beneath layers of soil and time. Their builders remain unknown. No chronicle records their rise. No lament mourns their fall. The stones remain where they were placed, shaped by hands whose names are not remembered. The sunken cities of the Nubian cataracts. In 1964, as waters rose behind the newly constructed Aswan High Dam, archaeologists rushed to document ancient sites along the Nile's southern reaches. Teams from around the world converged on the region, working under the banner of the UNESCO Nubian Campaign. Among the areas scheduled for submersion was Lower Nubia, a corridor of settlements, temples and burial grounds that stretched between Egypt and Sudan. Within this zone lay forgotten cities, built in stone, aligned with the river, and already partially buried in sand. Many of these sites would soon disappear beneath the reservoir that became Lake Nasser. Some were relocated, others were recorded only in sketches and field notes before they vanished underwater. The region had long been inhabited. Archaeological remains point to continuous human presence along the Nile's cataracts for thousands of years. Between 2500 BCE and 1500 BCE, this area was home to a sequence of cultures often grouped under the name Kushite or Nubian, though the labels vary. These communities built cities, developed pottery traditions, and traded with both Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa. Yet their records are scarce. Few inscriptions survive. Names, rulers, and internal structures remain mostly unknown. One of the submerged sites was the city of Buhan. It sat near the Second Cataract and had been occupied for centuries before becoming a fortress under Egyptian control during the Middle Kingdom. Earlier layers, however, showed domestic structures, ceramic workshops, and storage facilities built before the Egyptian expansion. These structures were constructed with mud brick, arranged in rectangular compounds, and oriented along narrow streets. Excavators found hearths, ovens, and pottery fragments. Some vessels bore incised markings, simple lines or crosshatches, but no writing. Further south lay the site of Pharos, known for its Christian-era cathedral, but built atop earlier layers dating back to at least 2000 BCE. Lower strata revealed walls, floors, and burial shafts from a culture that left behind ceramics, stone tools, and animal remains. One burial held a skeleton accompanied by cow horns, a polished axe head, and fragments of painted pottery. The paint had faded. The face was unrecognizable. Other sites, such as Serra, Aksha, and Megisa, revealed similar patterns, fortified structures overlaying older, non-literate settlements. Some had rock-cut tombs. Others had surface-level graves marked by stones. The inhabitants used a variety of burial methods. Some were flexed, others extended. Grave goods were sparse: beads, pots, and occasional copper items. The dead were not named. Pottery styles varied across the region but followed general trends. Early Nubian ceramics were handmade, often decorated with impressed patterns or comb designs. Later forms incorporated red slip, black-topped rims, and polished surfaces. Some vessels were burnished to a mirror sheen. The shapes included open bowls, narrow jars, and large storage pots. A few bore stylized animal motifs, mostly giraffes, birds, and cattle. These motifs had no known symbolic system. In the 1930s, long before the construction of the dam, the British archaeologist Walter Emery excavated parts of Qustul, a cemetery near the modern border between Egypt and Sudan. In one tomb, he found a fragment of a stone incense burner bearing a carved motif of a royal figure seated beneath a canopy, accompanied by a procession of animals and standards. The image resembled early Egyptian royal iconography. Some scholars propose that Qustul may have been the seat of a Nubian king prior to Egypt's unification. Others remained cautious. No name was carved on the object. The tombs yielded no written texts. The people of the Nubian cataracts practiced agriculture along narrow riverbanks. Irrigation was simple, based on the annual flood. Crops included sorghum, barley, and legumes. Fishing supplemented the diet. Animal bones suggest the presence of cattle, goats, and dogs. Tools included sickles, grinding stones, and fishhooks. At some sites, loom weights and spindle whorls indicated textile production. The textiles themselves have not survived. Some settlements had stone enclosures. These were not defensive in a military sense, but may have marked sacred or administrative zones. Inside, circular huts, storage pits, and hearths were arranged in concentric rows. At one site, archaeologists uncovered a line of upright stones, roughly carved, with no inscriptions. They formed a corridor leading to a shallow depression, possibly a basin or altar. No offerings were found. No symbols were present. Trade routes ran through the region. Goods moved between Egypt, Nubia, and lands further south. Beads made from shell, glass, and carnelian have been found at multiple sites. Copper tools and imported ceramics suggest contact with foreign centres, but the direction of influence is debated. Egypt labelled the region Tasseti, the land of the bow. It was both a source of soldiers and a land of rivals. Nubian cities appear in Egyptian texts, but only from the Egyptian perspective. The internal records of these Nubian cities, if they existed, have not survived. No libraries, archives, or inscriptions have been recovered. A few stelae bear Egyptian hieroglyphs, often set up during military campaigns. But native writing systems from this early period have not been found. Later Meroitic script emerged centuries later and cannot be retroactively applied. In 1962, during the last weeks before flooding, a team recorded a site known as Afye. The structures included a row of stone pillars, a walled courtyard, and a series of small chambers. The team took photographs and soil samples. No excavation was possible. When the dam gates closed, Afye disappeared underwater. Its contents remain unstudied. Its name was never confirmed. Satellite imagery today shows a vast reservoir covering what was once a corridor of ancient habitation. The water reflects the sun, a flat expanse broken only by rocky islands. Some of the islands are hilltops of former cities, others are the remains of cemeteries. The outlines of walls lie beneath the surface. Occasionally, water levels drop and expose partial ruins. They are unreachable by foot. In the Sudanese portion of the lake, known as Lake Nubia, similar losses occurred. Sites such as Ukma, Kosha, and Deba were submerged. These places had layered histories, phases of occupation, abandonment, and reuse. Pottery sherds were scattered across the ground. Grinding stones were left where they had fallen. Wooden beams had already rotted. The sites were mapped, photographed, and left behind. No written laments were carved for the cities that vanished beneath Lake Nasser. Their stones were not preserved in chronicles. Their builders were not recorded in lists of kings or dynasties. Their rituals, if performed, left no durable trace. The sand covered what the water did not erase. In museum storage rooms in Khartoum and Cairo, trays hold artifacts from these cities. Each tray is labelled with site codes, context numbers, and object types. Uninscribed. Burnished bowl. Stone pendant. The names of the users are missing, the meanings are silent. Every year the water level shifts, islands emerge, then disappear. What lies beneath remains intact, sealed beneath silt and silence. The megalith builders of the Sahara. In 1925, a French colonial officer stationed in the Tassili Naja plateau of southeastern Algeria recorded a series of standing stones while mapping caravan routes. The stones were tall, weathered, and arranged in circular and linear formations. Some were over 2 meters in height. They were isolated with no nearby settlements, and their purpose was unknown. Later expeditions confirmed hundreds of similar structures across the central Sahara, scattered through Algeria, Niger, Mali, and Libya. Some stood alone. Others formed alignments, circles, or enclosures. No inscriptions accompanied them. Their builders are unidentified. These megalithic structures date roughly between 5000 BCE and 1500 BCE. The chronology is imprecise due to the lack of associated organic materials and the difficulty of dating stone structures directly. In some cases, burial pits beneath or near the stones provided human remains, pottery fragments, and tools. Radiocarbon tests from these materials suggest that the Saharan megalith tradition began during the African humid period, when the desert supported lakes, grasslands, and wildlife. At the site of Nabta Playa, located in southern Egypt near the Sudanese border, a stone circle was discovered in the 1990s. The circle, composed of upright slabs arranged around a central cluster, measured about 4 meters across. Some researchers proposed an astronomical function, alignments with solstices or star risings. Others noted that similar stone structures appeared throughout the region, suggesting a widespread tradition of marking space with vertical stones. At Nabta Playa, nearby pits contained cattle bones and ceramic vessels. Some of the pottery was decorated with dotted patterns, none were inscribed. Further west, in the Adrar des Ifogas region of Mali, megalithic tombs dot the landscape. These consist of vertical slabs surrounding central chambers. Some have capstones, others are open to the sky. The tombs often contain human remains, sometimes multiple individuals. Objects such as stone beads, bone tools, and undecorated pottery accompany the burials. No consistent orientation is observed. The tombs vary in size and construction style. Some appear carefully built, others are irregular. In 1968, near the village of Tondidaru in Mali, Archaeologists excavated a group of cylindrical standing stones arranged in parallel rows. The stones were smooth and uniform, some standing nearly 3 meters tall. They were set into prepared holes and wedged with smaller rocks. No graves were found beneath them, no offerings were present. The arrangement suggested intentional design, but its purpose remains unknown. The stones had no carvings, no marks, and no associated structures. The Sahara's megalith builders left no writing system, no painted records, no oral traditions preserved their names. Their monuments stand in isolation. In some cases, erosion has toppled the stones. Others remain upright, partially buried in drifting sand. Their placement often aligns with natural features, hills, water sources, or ancient lake beds. Some appear in clusters, suggesting ceremonial landscapes. Others are solitary. At Adrar Bos, in Niger, megalithic tombs and cairns are found near stone tool scatters and pottery fragments. The area shows evidence of long-term habitation. Excavated burials revealed flexed skeletons, accompanied by shell beads and grinding stones. A few had copper ornaments, indicating contact with distant metal-producing cultures. No settlement structures have been preserved. The population size and social organisation remain speculative. Pottery associated with Saharan megalith sites is handmade with simple forms. Some vessels show combed or dotted decoration, others are plain. The clay varies by region, with local materials used for tempering. The design suggests shared techniques but not centralised production. The pottery does not display iconography or scenes. There are no depictions of events, rulers, or myths. The presence of cattle bones in some ceremonial contexts has led to theories about pastoralist rituals. In certain sites, large numbers of cow skulls were placed in rows or arranged near stone structures. These deposits suggest a symbolic function, possibly ancestral or spiritual. The lack of accompanying texts or imagery prevents firm conclusions. The interpretations remain theoretical. Rock art found in nearby regions may relate to the same cultural traditions. At Tassili Naja and Enadi, painted and engraved images show cattle herders, dancers and animals. The figures are stylized, often shown in profile. Some scenes include what appear to be rituals, groups of people surrounding a central figure or object. But the connection between rock art and megaliths is not established. The timelines overlap but do not match precisely. The art does not name places or people. In 2007, a ground survey in southern Libya identified over 1,000 stone structures in a single valley. These included circles, cairns, alignments, and isolated standing stones. Few had been mapped before, many were partially buried. Aerial imagery showed patterns, lines and clusters that stretched for kilometres. No settlements were visible. The builders had disappeared. Climatic shifts around 2000 BCE marked the end of the African humid period. Rainfall decreased, lakes dried, grasslands turned to desert. The once inhabitable regions became arid. Populations migrated toward the Nile, Sahel, or forest zones. The stone monuments were left behind. Some were reused, others were buried by sand and forgotten. Later populations in the Sahara did not preserve knowledge of the megalith builders. Tuareg and Berber traditions reference old stones but with no detailed lore. Some were labelled graves of the ancients. Others were avoided. No continuous memory exists. The meaning of the structures was lost. Excavations are limited by accessibility, climate, and political conditions. Many megalithic sites remain undocumented. Their age is estimated through associated materials or erosion patterns. Their cultural affiliations are uncertain. Some may belong to early pastoral groups. Others may mark regional variants of a shared belief system. The lack of writing restricts interpretation. In museum collections across West Africa and Europe, small artifacts from these sites are stored in drawers. Pottery sherds, beads, grinding stones. Labels note the site name, the stratigraphic layer, and the object type. No builder is listed. The items are separated from their context. The monuments they once accompanied remain in the desert. Satellite imagery continues to reveal new alignments. Linear arrangements of stones, some stretching for hundreds of meters, appear faintly on the surface. Their patterns are visible only from above. On the ground, they are often indistinct, buried or broken. Their scale suggests planning. Their function is still unknown. The megalithic tradition of the Sahara is one of the least understood monumental building efforts of the ancient world. It spans thousands of kilometres and several millennia. It involves societies capable of organising labour, selecting materials and creating enduring forms. But it left no voice, no instruction, no name. The stones remain, worn and quiet. Some lean in the wind, others rest flat covered in lichen. They are not tourist sites. Few are marked on maps. They were built by hands that are no longer remembered, for purposes that were never recorded. The abandoned settlements of the Orkney Isles. In 1850, a violent storm swept across the Bay of Scale on the western coast of mainland Orkney. The wind ripped across the low grassy cliffs, and waves battered the shoreline. When the storm passed, a farmer walking the coast noticed something strange in the exposed earth. A series of stone walls, partially buried beneath layers of turf and sand, had been revealed. The structures formed small rooms, passageways and hearths. The site would come to be known as Sahara Brae, a Neolithic village preserved beneath the dunes, abandoned long before written history reached the Northern Isles. Sahara Brae is only one of many prehistoric sites found across Orkney. These islands, located north of mainland Scotland, contain a dense concentration of megalithic tombs, standing stones, stone-built villages, and ceremonial enclosures. Between 3200 BCE and 2200 BCE, this region supported a network of settlements marked by dry stone architecture, complex burial practices, and shared decorative motifs. The people who built them did not write. No names, lineages, or beliefs were recorded. Their culture is reconstructed from what remains in the soil. The dwellings at Sahara Brae are built from stacked flat stones fitted without mortar. Each house contains a central hearth, stone beds, and built-in shelves or compartments. The rooms are linked by narrow covered passages. Midden deposits surrounding the village contain shells, bones, pottery fragments, and stone tools. The pottery is grooved ware, incised with geometric patterns, often in diagonal or curving lines. No markings indicate ownership or clan. The houses are uniform in size and layout. Social hierarchy, if it existed, is not visible in the architecture. To the east of Sahara Brae lies the Ness of Brodgar, a narrow strip of land separating two lochs. Excavations there began in the early 2000s. What appeared to be a small mound revealed massive stone structures beneath the surface. Rectangular buildings with thick walls, polished floors, and internal partitions. The buildings were laid out with precision, oriented towards celestial events. One structure, named Structure 10, measures over 25 metres long and contains finely cut stone, coloured pigments, and standing stones set inside its walls. It may have served a ritual or communal function. No writing was found. Decorative stones recovered from the Ness show incised spirals, chevrons, and parallel lines. Some slabs appear to have been reused, placed horizontally as paving or vertically as dividers. Traces of ochre and pigment suggest that the walls may once have been painted. No images or pictographs survive. The meanings of the designs are unknown. They are repeated across the site, suggesting a shared symbolic language that remains undeciphered. Not far from the Ness are the Ring of Brodgar and the Stones of Stennis, large stone circles erected with great effort. The Ring of Brodgar originally contained 60 stones, each weighing several tons. Only a portion remained standing. The stones are set in a circular ditch carved from bedrock. The purpose of the circle is not recorded. It may have served astronomical, social, or religious functions. The builders left no instructions, no narratives accompany the stones. Radiocarbon dating places the construction of these monuments between 2500 BCE and 2000 BCE. The sequence suggests long-term occupation and planning. Animal bones and pottery fragments found in the ditches suggest feasting or offerings. But without texts, these interpretations remain tentative. No single explanation fits all the evidence. Burial cairns such as Maeshowe and Unstan reveal another aspect of this culture. These are chambered tombs, constructed from massive stones and covered with earth. Maeshowe includes a long passage that aligns with the setting sun at the winter solstice. Inside, the chambered interior is carefully designed with side cells, fitted joints, and an overhead corbelled roof. When Maeshowe was opened in the 12th century, Norse runes were carved into the walls. These Viking graffiti refer to treasure, boredom, and names. But the original builders wrote nothing. The tomb was sealed for thousands of years. Its contents were disturbed. Its purpose remains unspoken. The people of Neolithic Orkney raised cattle, sheep, and pigs. They fished, gathered shellfish, and cultivated barley and wheat. Stone tools include knives, axes, and pounders. Bone tools, such as awls and needles, suggest textile production. Some artifacts were imported: volcanic glass, exotic stones, and possibly animal products. The scale of trade is unclear. No accounting system was preserved. Ornaments include beads, pendants, and carved bone objects. Some are shaped like birds, fish, or abstract forms. Their function is uncertain. They may have held symbolic or decorative roles. A few carved bulls, polished and marked with geometric patterns, have been found in burials and settlements. Their purpose is debated. No matching text or depiction explains their use. The climate of Orkney during the Neolithic was milder than today. Peat had not yet spread across the land. Forests were sparse, and open fields supported grazing. Over time, environmental conditions changed. Soils became less fertile. Wind erosion increased. Sand began to cover the coasts. Settlements such as Sahara were abandoned. Houses were left intact. Roofs collapsed. Entrances filled with sand. The departure left no violence, no fire, no weapons, no trauma. It was quiet. Other settlements across the Orkney archipelago followed similar patterns. Barnhouse, Rinyo, and Links of Noltland all show phases of occupation and abandonment. Structures were built, modified, reused, and finally left behind. Midden heaps grew, artifacts accumulated, then the activity stopped. The timing varies by site, but the general pattern is shared. DNA analysis from skeletal remains shows that the Neolithic population of Orkney had connections to early farming groups from mainland Europe. Some genetic markers are shared with populations from the Iberian Peninsula and the Western Mediterranean. Cultural traits, such as house layout and pottery design, also show connections. But the Orkney communities developed distinct forms. Their architecture is unique in Britain. In the early Bronze Age, the stone circles fell out of use. The style of pottery changed. Burial practices shifted. New materials appeared: metal tools, ornaments, and weaponry. The stone-built villages were no longer inhabited. The older ceremonial centres were avoided or forgotten. The transition was gradual. No event is recorded. Orkney's later history includes Picts, Norse, and Scottish rule, but none preserved detailed knowledge of the Neolithic sites. The monuments remained visible. The tombs remained sealed. Local stories sometimes labelled them as fairy mounds or homes of the dead, but these were later inventions. The original names, builders, and purposes were not preserved. Today, many of the sites are protected. Visitors walk among the stones. Informational plaques describe the known facts. Artists and archaeologists continue to document the discoveries, but much remains unspoken. Without written records, the lives of Orkney's first builders are glimpsed only in fragments. Rooms without voices, tools without owners, monuments without messages. The wind moves through the ring of Brodgar. Grass covers the slopes of Maeshowe. The ocean reaches the stones at Skara Brae. The builders are gone. Their cities are quiet. The forgotten towns of the Sogdian valleys. In 1947, Soviet archaeologists excavating near the Zarafshan River in modern-day Uzbekistan uncovered the ruins of an ancient settlement buried beneath centuries of wind-blown silt. The site, called Afrasiab, revealed mud brick foundations, sections of painted walls, and fragments of ceramic ware. As work progressed, a city emerged, once part of a larger network of urban centres across Sogdiana, a historical region that had flourished between the 6th century BCE and the 8th century CE. Though some Sogdian cities such as Samarkand and Bukhara would survive into the Islamic period, many others did not. Their names were erased, their buildings collapsed, their language fell silent. Sogdiana was situated between the Amudarya and Syr rivers, within a fertile corridor of oases, river valleys, and trade routes. At its height, the region contained dozens of towns, fortresses, and caravanserais. These centres functioned as hubs of commerce, culture, and administration. The Sogdians were known to Chinese, Persian, and Arab writers, yet much of what survives comes from external sources. Indigenous written records are rare. When found, they are often fragmentary. The Sogdian language was written in an adapted Aramaic script. Letters, religious texts, and contracts have been found at a few sites. mostly preserved by chance in dry conditions or buried under collapsed buildings. One cache, discovered in 1907 by the British explorer Aurel Stein at a ruined watchtower in western China, included letters written by Sogdian merchants. The texts describe trade disputes, banditry, and personal concerns. The handwriting is uneven. Some letters end abruptly. These are the exception. Most towns left no archive. Afrasiab, the ancient core of Samarkand, was inhabited for centuries before its destruction by the Mongols in the 13th century, but earlier layers show occupation during the Achaemenid, Hellenistic, and Sasanian periods. Painted murals from the 7th century CE depict foreign envoys, caravans, and local elites. The paintings are vibrant: horses, camels, and musicians, but there are no identifying inscriptions. The figures are anonymous. The scenes are symbolic, not narrative. At the site of Panjakent near the Zarafshan Valley in Tajikistan, excavations revealed a well-preserved Sogdian town. Houses, temples, and administrative buildings lined narrow streets. The walls of elite residences were decorated with murals, scenes from epics, mythology, and daily life. One panel shows a banquet, another depicts a battle, a third shows demons with outstretched arms. The paintings are elaborate but contain no written explanation. Their meaning depends on interpretation. Panjakent was abandoned around 722 CE, following the Arab conquest of the region. Historical sources mention resistance, treaties, and eventual incorporation into the caliphate. The town's buildings were left intact. Roofs fell, murals crumbled, rooms filled with dust. Over time, the site disappeared beneath the soil. It was not rebuilt. Other Sogdian towns, such as Rabinjan, Bukhara, and Shahrisabz, show similar patterns of partial continuity and sudden change. In some cases, cities were absorbed into new empires and adapted to new languages and religions. In others, they were deserted. Their original names were forgotten or transformed. Their streets were buried. Their walls collapsed. Sogdian religion was syncretic. Archaeological finds include Zoroastrian fire altars, images of local gods, and traces of Buddhist and Manichaean influence. Temples at Panjakent and Afrasiab contain cult niches, sacrificial platforms, and symbolic decorations. Some show fire urns, others display animal figures. The iconography is rich but not fully understood. No theological texts survive from the early period. Graves found near Sogdian towns vary in type. Some are pit burials with modest goods, ceramics, jewellery, tools. Others are stone-lined chambers with multiple individuals. In one burial, a bronze mirror was placed near the head of a young woman. Another grave contained a sword, a ceramic jug, and a pair of boots. The inscriptions, when present, are brief. Names are rare. Many graves are unmarked. Trade played a central role in Sogdian society. The region's cities connected China, India, Persia, and Byzantium. Goods included silk, spices, glassware, horses, and coins. Sogdian merchants are mentioned in Chinese chronicles as far east as Xi'an. Some settled abroad, forming diaspora communities. Their records survive in other lands, not at home. The centres they left behind declined quietly. At the site of Mug in the Yagnob Valley, archaeologists found a cache of Sogdian documents written on wooden paper. These texts date to the early 8th century and include military orders, inventories, and letters. They were found in a ruined fortress, likely used as a last refuge during conflict. The documents mention officials, taxes, and supplies, but the broader picture remains incomplete. Outside the fortress, the surrounding towns left no equivalent archives. Sogdian architecture followed standard Central Asian patterns: mud brick walls, flat roofs, and internal courtyards. Some towns had defensive walls with towers and gates. The layout of streets was irregular but functional. Water was managed through canals and wells. Public buildings included temples, baths, and markets, but few were monumental. Stone was rarely used. The remains are fragile. Wind and rain eroded many sites before they were recorded. Ceramics from Sogdian towns include glazed and unglazed wares, decorated with incised lines, painted motifs, and moulded reliefs. Common forms include bowls, jugs, and storage jars. Some were imported, others were locally made. Pottery helps date layers, but does not name their makers. No potter's mark has been conclusively linked to an individual or workshop. In the 10th century, Arab geographers described Samarkand and Bukhara as centres of learning and commerce. but they did not refer to the earlier Sogdian builders. The transition from Sogdian to Islamic society was gradual but complete. Language changed, scripts changed, the older culture faded. By the 11th century, the Sogdian language was no longer spoken in cities. The Agnobi people, living in the remote valleys of Tajikistan, speak a language descended from Sogdian. Their oral traditions are rich in folklore, but do not recall specific cities, rulers, or monuments. The connection is linguistic, not historical. The material culture of the Sogdians remains buried. In 2003, a survey in the Kashkadaria region identified foundations of a rectangular enclosure surrounded by smaller structures. The site had no name. Pottery scattered across the surface matched 6th century forms. Excavation revealed hearths, storage pits, and a collapsed mud brick wall. No text was found. The settlement had been abandoned. Climate change, political conquest, and economic shifts contributed to the disappearance of many Sogdian towns. Some were destroyed during wars, others declined as trade routes shifted. No single cause applies to all. The process was uneven. Some cities endured, others did not. In museum collections in Tashkent, Dushanbe, and St. Petersburg, Sogdian artifacts are labelled by site and layer. A painted tile, a bronze clasp, a fragment of script on paper. Few are connected to names. The towns they came from exist as lines on excavation maps and entries in field journals. The walls remain buried. The sun rises over the Zaravshan Valley. Dust covers the outlines of walls. The names of the towns are missing. The people are gone. The silence remains. The buried villages of the Mississippian world. In 1894, while levelling ground near the eastern edge of the Cahokia Mound site in Illinois, workers uncovered a series of shallow depressions and rows of fire-blackened stones. Among them were pieces of broken pottery, stone tools, and animal bones. The artifacts were quickly discarded. No formal excavation took place. At the time, the focus was on the large mounds nearby, particularly Monk's Mound, a massive earthen platform rising over 30 metres high. But scattered around Cahokia and far beyond it lay the remains of hundreds of smaller Mississippian settlements. Many have since disappeared. Their names were never recorded. Their structures were erased by agriculture, flooding, or time. The Mississippian culture emerged around 800 CE and flourished until approximately 1600 CE across the southeastern and midwestern regions of what is now the United States. Centered at large ceremonial complexes such as Cahokia, Moundville, and Etowah, the Mississippian world also included outlying villages, hamlets, and seasonal camps. These smaller sites often served agricultural, residential, or ritual functions. Most were built from wood, thatch, and earth. They left no writing. Their people did not record names, genealogies, or events. At the center of many Mississippian settlements was a plaza, an open, rectangular area often surrounded by houses or public buildings. Nearby stood one or more earthen mounds. These were constructed in stages, using baskets of soil carried by hand. Some were flat-topped platforms, others conical or ridge-shaped. The mounds may have supported temples, elite residences, or charnel houses. In the smaller villages, mounds were often modest in size. Today, many are no longer visible, flattened by centuries of cultivation. Excavations at sites such as Kincaid in southern Illinois, Angel Mounds in Indiana, and Town Creek in North Carolina have revealed outlines of rectangular buildings, post holes, hearths, and refuse pits. House walls were made of wooden posts covered with wattle and daub. Roofs were thatched with grass. Floors were dug slightly below ground level. The buildings were arranged in clusters. Some formed family compounds. Others stood alone. Pottery recovered from Mississippian villages includes bowls, jars, and plates made from local clay. The surfaces were sometimes burnished, incised, or stamped with paddles wrapped in cord or fabric. Motifs included spirals, concentric circles, and stylized animals. Some pots show signs of cooking. Others appear ceremonial. No inscriptions are present. The makers are unknown. Shell-tempered ceramics are a hallmark of Mississippian pottery. Crushed freshwater mussel shell was added to the clay to prevent cracking during firing. The technique spread across the region. Styles varied by locality but shared basic forms. Pottery helps identify cultural affiliation but cannot trace individual identity. Graves found at village sites differ widely. Some contained single burials, others group interments. The bodies were usually placed in shallow pits, flexed or extended. Grave goods included beads, shell ornaments, stone tools and pottery vessels. In some cases, infants were buried with elaborate objects. In others, adults were interred with little or nothing. There is no uniform pattern. The meanings of these practices are unclear. At the site of Zebri in Arkansas, excavated in the 1970s before the construction of a levee, archaeologists found a small Mississippian village. The remains included post holes, hearths and trash pits. A layer of flood-deposited silt covered part of the site, preserving artefacts in situ. Among the finds were bone awls, chipped stone flakes, deer bones and shell beads. The village had been abandoned before European contact. Its name was never recorded. Stone tools from Mississippian villages include hoes made from Mill Creek chert, projectile points, scrapers and drills. Groundstone tools include mortars, pestles and axes. Bone and antler were used to make needles, fishhooks and hairpins. The tools reflect a subsistence economy based on maize agriculture, hunting, fishing and gathering. No specialised toolmaker is known. The work was widespread and shared. Iconography appears in some ceramic and stone items. Carved gorgets, engraved shell cups, and painted pottery show figures with wings, serpents, suns, and abstract designs. These images are part of what archaeologists call the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex. The meanings are symbolic but not written. The visual language suggests shared beliefs, but no texts explain it. Wooden artifacts are rarely preserved. In rare anaerobic conditions, such as waterlogged pits, fragments of woven mats, dugout canoes, or carved figurines have been found. One figurine from Spiro Mounds in Oklahoma depicts a kneeling figure with detailed facial features and hair. It was found in a mound chamber surrounded by other ceremonial objects. Its identity is unknown. Many Mississippian villages were occupied seasonally. Others were long-term settlements. Over time, some grew into towns. Others shrank and disappeared. Environmental changes, social shifts, or political reorganization may have caused movement. The reasons are rarely visible in the archaeological record. Written accounts are absent. Spanish explorers in the 16th century encountered Mississippian societies during expeditions led by De Soto and others. Their journals mention towns, chiefs, plazas, and mounds. But these accounts are limited, filtered through foreign perspectives, and focus on larger centres. Smaller villages were rarely described. Some may have already been abandoned due to disease or conflict. After European contact, Mississippian lifeways declined rapidly. Epidemics, warfare, and displacement disrupted settlements. The villages were left behind. Many were overgrown, buried, or repurposed. Later settlers did not recognize their origins. Some mounds were mined for soil, others were cleared for planting. The villages disappeared without record. In museum storerooms across the southeastern United States, boxes contain artifacts from these sites. Sherds, projectile points, animal bones, and ornaments are sorted by grid square and layer. Few carry names. Field notes describe contexts: pit feature, house floor, burial 12. The people themselves remain anonymous. Remote sensing and aerial photography continue to reveal hidden village sites, soil discolorations, post patterns, and geometric anomalies visible from above. Ground truthing confirms domestic debris and cultural layers. Many are not excavated. They remain under fields, forests, or neighbourhoods. Cultural memory among descendant communities survives in oral histories, motifs, and spiritual practices. But direct lineage to specific Mississippian villages is difficult to trace. The lack of writing, the scale of disruption, and the transformation of landscape make reconstruction fragmentary. The fields where villages once stood grow corn again. Rivers flood and recede. The soil shifts. The post holes fade. The names of the villages are not spoken. The voices are no longer heard. In 1931, during the construction of a road near the Niemen River in present-day Lithuania, workers unearthed large wooden beams preserved in damp soil. Beneath them lay fragments of clay pottery, animal bones, and fire-cracked stones. Archaeologists identified the remnants as part of a hill fort, an earthen and timber structure once occupied by the Baltic tribes who lived in this region for centuries before written history reached it. The fort had been destroyed by fire. No documents recorded the event. No names of its builders were preserved. The Baltic tribes, ancestors of modern Lithuanians and Latvians, occupied the eastern shores of the Baltic Sea as early as the Late Bronze Age. By 1000 BCE, they had constructed hundreds of small fortifications across the river valleys and forested hills of present-day Lithuania, Latvia, and northeastern Poland. These forts were built from soil, timber, and stone, often perched on natural elevations and encircled by palisades. The people who lived within them did not write. Their traditions were oral. Their memory survives in fragments. Archaeological surveys have recorded more than 800 hill forts across the Baltic region. Some are isolated, others cluster near rivers, wetlands, or ancient trade routes. Forts like Apwol, Kernave, and Tervete were large enough to support small towns. Others were no more than seasonal refugees. Their ramparts still rise above the forest in gentle mounds, covered in grass and trees. Few remain in use. Most are quiet. Excavations at Apwol revealed a wooden palisade enclosing domestic structures, storage pits, and fire hearths. Radiocarbon dating places the settlement's activity between 500 BCE and 800 CE. Pottery fragments show hand-formed vessels with smoothed or incised surfaces. Tools made of iron and bone included knives, awls, and fish hooks. Some structures were partially sunken into the earth. Others stood above ground. No plans or blueprints survive. The buildings were rebuilt and modified over time. Burials near Baltic hill forts vary in form. Some graves are flat, marked by stones. Others are barrows, mounds of earth and stone placed over the deceased. Grave goods include amber beads, iron weapons, bronze ornaments, and ceramic vessels. In some cases, cremation was practiced. In others, the body was buried intact. The variation suggests local customs rather than centralized rules. Names of the dead were not inscribed. Amber found along the Baltic coast was a major trade item. Baltic amber has been discovered in Mycenaean tombs, Roman markets, and Egyptian ornaments. Trade routes extended south to the Black Sea and east toward the Urals. Baltic people participated in this exchange but did not leave records of it. The movement of amber is known from archaeological context, not written accounts. The oldest references to the Baltic peoples appear in Greco-Roman sources. Tacitus, writing in the 1st century CE, mentions the Esti, a group believed to inhabit parts of the southeastern Baltic. He notes their harvesting of amber but does not describe their settlements or beliefs. Later sources mention the Prussians, Lithuanians, and Latgalians, but these references come from outsiders, German crusaders, Russian scribes, or Scandinavian traders. The Baltic tribes themselves left no written chronicles. At Kernave, a site on the nearest river, 5 hill forts stand in close proximity. Excavations have revealed layers of occupation: wooden buildings, paved courtyards, ironworking shops, and domestic waste. Some structures date to the 1st millennium BCE. Others were occupied until the 14th century. One fort was destroyed by fire around 1390 during the Teutonic invasions. Burned timbers, arrowheads, and collapsed roofs were found. No inscriptions explained the cause. No survivor named it. Baltic religion before Christianization was animistic. Sacred groves, stones, and springs served as ritual spaces. Offerings included animal bones, tools, and food remains. Some sacred sites were associated with hill forts. Others stood alone. Excavated altars are rare, but pits containing bones and pottery suggest ritual deposition. Symbols carved on stones or wood have not been decoded. The meanings are not written. In the 13th century, the Baltic region became the target of military campaigns by the Teutonic Knights. Castles were built on conquered land. Pagan sanctuaries were destroyed. Forts were abandoned or rebuilt in stone. Christian chronicles record these events from the invader's perspective. They name the conquests, but not the conquered. The original place names were replaced or distorted. Some forts, such as Tervete in Latvia, continued as administrative centres under foreign rule. Others were deserted. Soil accumulated over the ruins. Forests returned. In many cases, local populations forgot the original names. Hilltops once crowned by timber walls became grazing fields or overgrown knolls. Stones from the fortifications were reused in foundations and roads. Archaeological finds from hill fort sites include spindle whorls, loom weights, and iron scythes. These suggest domestic life, farming, weaving, and tool-making. Clay figurines, carved wooden items, and fragments of imported glass indicate social and ritual activities. No centralized storage facilities have been identified. Each site functioned independently. The political structure was likely tribal and flexible. Baltic languages preserve traces of the past. Words for hill, fort, and grove recur in place names. Myths collected in the later centuries refer to heroes, battles, and sacred trees. But these were written down long after the events they describe. The link between story and site is speculative. No direct transmission survives. In 2002, during forestry work near the village of Gintarai in Lithuania, workers unearthed a line of stones arranged in a circle. Excavation revealed post holes and burnt soil. A structure had stood there, perhaps a watchtower or shrine. Pottery and animal bones were found in the fill. The site had no name. No oral history accompanied it. It was mapped, photographed, and reburied. Today, hill forts in Lithuania and Latvia are marked with signs. Trails lead to the top. Plaques describe the known facts, dates, artifacts, dimensions. Visitors climb the slopes. Some bring flowers or light candles. Others stand quietly. The forts offer views of rivers, forests, and fields. The wind moves across the grass. Museum collections in Vilnius and Riga contain artifacts from these sites: iron arrowheads, bronze brooches, amber pendants, clay pots. Each is labelled with a site number, a stratigraphic layer, and a function. Cooking vessel, spindle whirl, tool handle. The names of the users are not recorded. The Baltic hill forts were built, used, rebuilt, and abandoned over centuries. Some burned, others collapsed. Their histories were never written down. Their builders never signed their walls. The sites remain, quiet, wooded, and weathered, standing above the rivers that once linked them. The vanished forts of the Baltic tribes. In 1931, during the construction of a road near the Niemen River in present-day Lithuania, workers unearthed large wooden beams preserved in damp soil. Beneath them lay fragments of clay pottery, animal bones, and fire-cracked stones. Archaeologists identified the remnants as part of a hill fort, an earthen and timber structure once occupied by the Baltic tribes who lived in this region for centuries before written history reached it. The fort had been destroyed by fire. No documents recorded the event. No names of its builders were preserved. The Baltic tribes, ancestors of modern Lithuanians and Latvians, occupied the eastern shores of the Baltic Sea as early as the Late Bronze Age. By 1000 BCE, they had constructed hundreds of small fortifications across the river valleys and forested hills of present-day Lithuania, Latvia, and northeastern Poland. These forts were built from soil, timber, and stone, often perched on natural elevations and encircled by palisades. The people who lived within them did not write. Their traditions were oral. Their memory survives in fragments. Archaeological surveys have recorded more than 800 hill forts across the Baltic region. Some are isolated, others cluster near rivers, wetlands, or ancient trade routes. Forts like Apuol, Kernava, and Tavete were large enough to support small towns. Others were no more than seasonal refugees. Their ramparts still rise above the forest in gentle mounds, covered in grass and trees. Few remain in use, most are quiet. Excavations at Apuol revealed a wooden palisade enclosing domestic structures, storage pits, and fire hearths. Radiocarbon dating places the settlement's activity between 500 BCE and 800 CE. Pottery fragments show hand-formed vessels with smoothed or incised surfaces. Tools made of iron and bone included knives, awls, and fishhooks. Some structures were partially sunken into the earth. Others stood above ground. No plans or blueprints survive. The buildings were rebuilt and modified over time. Burials near Baltic hill forts vary in form. Some graves are flat, marked by stones. Others are barrows, mounds of earth and stone placed over the deceased. Grave goods include amber beads, iron weapons, bronze ornaments, and ceramic vessels. In some cases, cremation was practiced. In others, the body was buried intact. The variation suggests local customs rather than centralized rules. Names of the dead were not inscribed. Amber, found along the Baltic coast, was a major trade item. Baltic amber has been discovered in Mycenaean tombs, Roman markets, and Egyptian ornaments. Trade routes extended south to the Black Sea and east toward the Urals. Baltic people participated in this exchange but did not leave records of it. The movement of amber is known from archaeological context, not written accounts. The oldest references to the Baltic peoples appear in Greco-Roman sources. Tacitus, writing in the 1st century CE, mentions the Estiing, a group believed to inhabit parts of the southeastern Baltic. He notes their harvesting of amber but does not describe their settlements or beliefs. Later sources mention the Prussians, Lithuanians, and Latgalians, but these references come from outsiders, German crusaders, Russian scribes, or Scandinavian traders. The Baltic tribes themselves left no written chronicles. At Kernavė, a site on the Neris River, 5 hill forts stand in close proximity. Excavations have revealed layers of occupation: wooden buildings, paved courtyards, ironworking shops, and domestic waste. Some structures date to the 1st millennium BCE. Others were occupied until the 14th century. One fort was destroyed by fire around 1390 during the Teutonic invasions. Burned timbers, arrowheads, and collapsed roofs were found. No inscriptions explain the cause, no survivor named it. Baltic religion before Christianization was animistic. Sacred groves, stones, and springs served as ritual spaces. Offerings included animal bones, tools, and food remains. Some sacred sites were associated with hill forts, others stood alone. Excavated altars are rare, but pits containing bones and pottery suggest ritual deposition. Symbols carved on stones or wood have not been decoded. The meanings are not written. In the 13th century, the Baltic region became the target of military campaigns by the Teutonic Knights. Castles were built on conquered land. Pagan sanctuaries were destroyed. Forts were abandoned or rebuilt in stone. Christian chronicles record these events from the invader's perspective. They name the conquests but not the conquered. The original place names were replaced or distorted. Some forts, such as Tervete in Latvia, continued as administrative centres under foreign rule. Others were deserted. Soil accumulated over the ruins. Forests returned. In many cases, local populations forgot the original names. Hilltops once crowned by timber walls became grazing fields or overgrown knolls. Stones from the fortifications were reused in foundations and roads. Archaeological finds from hill fort sites include spindle whorls, loom weights, and iron scythes. These suggest domestic life, farming, weaving, and toolmaking. Clay figurines, carved wooden items, and fragments of imported glass indicate social and ritual activities. No centralized storage facilities have been identified. Each site functioned independently. The political structure was likely tribal and flexible. Baltic languages preserve traces of the past. Words for hill, fort, and grove recur in place names. Myths collected in later centuries refer to heroes, battles, and sacred trees. But these were written down long after the events they describe. The link between story and site is speculative. No direct transmission survives. In 2002, during forestry work near the village of Gintarai in Lithuania, workers unearthed a line of stones arranged in a circle. Excavation revealed post holes and burnt soil. A structure had stood there, perhaps a watchtower or shrine. Pottery and animal bones were found in the fill. The site had no name, no oral history accompanied it. It was mapped, photographed, and reburied. Today, hill forts in Lithuania and Latvia are marked with signs. Trails lead to the top. Plaques describe the known facts, dates, artifacts, dimensions. Visitors climb the slopes. Some bring flowers or light candles, others stand quietly. The forts offer views of rivers, forests, and fields. The wind moves across the grass. Museum collections in Vilnius and Riga contain artifacts from these sites: iron arrowheads, bronze brooches, amber pendants, clay pots. Each is labelled with a site number, a stratigraphic layer, and a function. Cooking vessel. Spindle whorl, tool handle. The names of the users are not recorded. The Baltic hill forts were built, used, rebuilt, and abandoned over centuries. Some burned, others collapsed. Their histories were never written down. Their builders never signed their walls. The sites remain, quiet, wooded and weathered, standing above the rivers that once linked them. The stone villages of the Canary Islands. In 1933, a Spanish archaeologist named Luis Diego Cuscoy surveyed a high plateau on the island of Tenerife in the Canary Islands. Among the rocks and scrub, he found low stone walls outlining rectangular rooms, arranged in rows along a ridge. The structures were built without mortar, using flat basalt stones carefully fitted together. Nearby, fragments of handmade pottery, animal bones, and grinding stones lay exposed in the soil. The site, like many others across the archipelago, had no written history. It was not marked on any map. Local people referred to it simply as Los Antiguos, the Old Ones. Before the Spanish conquest in the 15th century, the Canary Islands were inhabited by indigenous peoples often collectively referred to as the Guanches. These communities, divided across the 7 main islands, built permanent settlements, cultivated crops, and practiced animal husbandry. Each island developed distinct cultural traits, but shared common material traditions: dry stone architecture, painted pottery, and burial caves. The Guanches had no writing system. Their origin stories were oral. When conquest came, most of those stories were lost. Archaeological remains indicate continuous habitation of the islands from around 1000 BCE to the 1400s CE. Settlements were often located in elevated areas, near springs or seasonal watercourses. On Tenerife, La Palma, and Gran Canaria, stone house foundations have been documented in clusters of 2 to 10 structures, sometimes forming small villages. The rooms were rectangular or circular, with low walls and thatched roofs supported by wooden posts. The stones were uncut but placed with care. Floors were packed earth. Hearths were common. No inscriptions marked ownership. Pottery recovered from these settlements includes hand-built bowls, jars, and plates with simple, incised decoration. Geometric patterns, zigzags, spirals, and chevrons were applied with fingers or tools. The designs vary slightly by island. Most pottery was undecorated and utilitarian. No known symbols or signs have been linked to a writing system. The decoration does not convey names or dates. Food production focused on pastoralism and dry farming. Goats, sheep, and pigs were kept in stone corrals. Crops such as barley, wheat, and legumes were cultivated on terraces built into hillsides. Tools included stone mortars, pestles, and wooden ploughs. Grinding stones are commonly found in household contexts. At some sites, circular threshing floors paved with stone have been preserved. These were communal spaces. No records of their operation exist. Burials were typically placed in caves or shallow pits. On Gran Canaria, artificial cave tombs were sometimes cut into soft volcanic rock. The dead were often wrapped in leather or plant fibre mats, sometimes placed on stone platforms. Some tombs contained personal items, pendants, pottery, or tools. In a few cases, mummification was practiced. Preservation varied by island and climate. No burial inscriptions have been found. The names of the dead are unknown. The Guanches developed a variety of architectural forms suited to their environment. In addition to domestic dwellings, they built grain silos, animal enclosures, and ceremonial structures. On Lanzarote, large circular enclosures known as zonzamas were constructed with multiple concentric walls. Their function remains debated. Some believe they were elite residences. Others suggest ritual purposes. No written clues survive. At Cueva de los Verdes on Lanzarote, ceramic fragments, charcoal layers, and shellfish remains indicate temporary occupation. The site is a lava tube, naturally formed and later modified. It may have served as a refuge or seasonal shelter. The exact use is uncertain. Oral traditions reference hiding places but do not preserve detailed narratives. Rock art is present on several islands. Petroglyphs include spirals, grids, and schematic figures. The carvings are shallow and weathered. They often appear near springs, hilltops, or boundary zones. Interpretation is difficult. The designs do not resemble any known alphabet. They may have symbolic or calendrical meaning, but no direct evidence supports this. No translation exists. On La Palma, archaeologists documented a site with more than 50 stone houses arranged along a ridgeline. The layout suggests long-term planning. Paths connected structures. Cisterns collected rainwater. Excavated rooms contained tools, potsherds, and spindle whorls. One room held a basalt grinding slab nearly a metre wide. No signs of wealth inequality were found. No central monument. The community left no texts. Its name was not preserved. Spanish chroniclers arriving in the late 15th century described the islanders in broad, often conflicting terms. Some referred to them as noble and pastoral. Others described resistance and warfare. Their languages were transcribed phonetically but not systematically. Vocabulary lists survive, but they are partial and inconsistent. The people's own stories were not written down. They were remembered by outsiders. During and after the conquest, indigenous settlements were destroyed, repurposed, or abandoned. Survivors were relocated, enslaved, or assimilated. European-style towns were built over old villages. Many original sites were forgotten. Some hilltop settlements now lie beneath terraces, roads, or forests. Others remain as low stone walls barely visible among the scrub. In 1991, hikers in a remote area of La Gomera came across a ring of stones partially hidden by underbrush. Archaeologists later identified it as the base of a dwelling, with internal divisions suggesting a multi-room structure. Nearby were fragments of ceramic ware, a grinding stone, and a bone needle. No sign indicated when or why the site was abandoned. The community that built it left no trace in records. Excavations continue across the islands. On Tenerife, ongoing work at the site of El Portillo has revealed multiple phases of occupation, with reused building materials and layered hearths. Radiocarbon dating places initial use around 600 CE, with continued habitation until the 1400s. No abrupt destruction layer was found. The settlement was likely abandoned gradually. The reasons are unknown. Artifacts from the Canary Islands are now housed in regional museums. Clay pots, stone tools, and bone ornaments are displayed with tags noting site, island, and estimated date. Few objects are associated with individuals. Labels describe function, not identity. The pieces are mute, the makers unnamed. Rock shelters, stone villages, and burial caves remain scattered across the islands. Some are protected, others are eroding. The wind moves through broken walls. Lizards bask on ancient stones. Grass grows in the floors of forgotten homes. Visitors walk past without knowing the names. The Canary Islands' indigenous cultures existed in isolation for over 2,000 years. They developed settlements, traditions, and lifeways suited to volcanic terrain and limited rainfall. But they did not write. Their cities and stories remain unrecorded, known only through stones, bones, and silence. The deserted strongholds of the Dempt Kingdom. In 1891, a German explorer named Friedrich Rosen passed through the rugged highlands of Eritrea, near the modern town of Yeha. Among the ruins he documented were massive stone walls, standing several meters high, cut from large rectangular blocks fitted without mortar. Inside the structure lay fallen columns, fragments of sculpted stone and broken pottery. The building lacked inscriptions. Locals called it the Temple of Yeha. Later excavations identified it as a pre-Aksumite structure, possibly dating back to the 8th century BCE. The site was attributed to a little-known polity called DMT, one of the earliest complex societies in the Horn of Africa. Beyond this temple little remains. The kingdom of Dempt is believed to have existed between the 10th and 5th centuries BCE, centered in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. It preceded the Aksumite Empire, which would rise in the 1st century CE and leave behind coins, inscriptions, and monumental architecture. In contrast, Dempt left few written records. Its cities, strongholds, and cultural practices are mostly inferred from scattered ruins, pottery styles, and imported objects. Its capital, if it had one, has not been confirmed. Yeha remains the best candidate. Archaeological investigations at Yeha have uncovered a large stone building, often interpreted as a temple or palace. The walls, preserved up to 10 meters in height, are constructed from precisely cut limestone blocks. The masonry technique resembles that used in Sabaean architecture in South Arabia. Some scholars suggest that DMT maintained contact with the Sabaeans across the Red Sea. Fragments of South Arabian inscriptions have been found at Yeha, but the majority of the site is uninscribed. The people who built it did not write their own names. Pottery from Dempt sites includes hand-formed and wheel-thrown wares, decorated with incised lines, punctate designs, and combed patterns. The ceramics show local development with foreign influence. Some vessels mimic Sabaean shapes, others are distinctly regional. No symbolic or written marks have been found on the pottery. The makers are unknown. Stone tools, bronze items, and iron implements have been recovered in small quantities. Among them are arrowheads, chisels, and blades. Jewellery includes stone beads, bronze rings, and shell ornaments. One burial near Yeha yielded a gold earring, but no associated inscription. The grave was modest, an oval pit lined with stones. The individual inside had been buried with arms crossed. No name survives. Additional Demtera ruins have been identified at Matara, Hawulti, and Keskiza. These sites include stone platforms, pillars, and fragments of carved stelae. Some stelae bear geometric motifs. A few contain short inscriptions in South Arabian script. The inscriptions mention gods or titles but never personal histories. The political structure of DMT remains unclear. No royal lists or administrative texts have been found. At Hawulti, a solitary obelisk stands on a hilltop, weathered by wind and rain. It is carved from a single block of stone, with a stepped top and faint reliefs. A partial inscription in the Sabaean language mentions offerings but does not name the builder. The site is isolated. Surrounding structures are eroded or buried. No city walls have been located. Some scholars propose that Dempt was a confederation of highland communities rather than a centralised kingdom. Others suggest it was a trade-based state with religious centres. The archaeological record supports both interpretations. Sites are spread across mountainous terrain, often near seasonal streams. Fortified structures are rare. Defensive features may have included elevated locations and stone walls, but no large-scale fortresses have been documented. Terraced agriculture supported these communities. Remains of ancient fields, stone bunds and irrigation channels are visible in satellite imagery. Excavation confirms the cultivation of barley, wheat and millet. Animal bones include cattle, goats and donkeys. Metal tools for agriculture are limited. Grinding stones are common. No agricultural texts or records survive. Trade may have connected DMT to Arabia, Nubia and the Nile Valley. Imported goods include incense, beads and bronze artifacts. South Arabian inscriptions suggest contact, but the direction and nature of influence remain debated. Some believe Sabaean colonists settled in the region. Others argue for independent development with cultural borrowing. The lack of local inscriptions limits interpretation. In 1963, Italian archaeologists excavating near Matara uncovered a sequence of stone buildings arranged around a central courtyard. The structures were rectangular, with paved floors and stone benches. One room contained fragments of ceramic storage jars, charcoal and burned grain. Radiocarbon dating placed the layer to the mid-1st millennium BCE. No inscriptions or symbolic objects were found. The function of the complex remains unclear. No large cemeteries from the DMT period have been identified. Burials appear scattered, often in simple pits or small stone chambers. Grave goods are minimal. In one burial near Yeha, archaeologists found 2 ceramic bowls, a bronze pin and a bone comb. The body was poorly preserved. The tomb had no marker. Later Aksumite texts and traditions do not mention Dint by name. Oral histories collected in the region refer to ancient builders and lost cities but lack specificity. Some legends describe giants or ancestral kings. These stories were recorded centuries after the ruins were abandoned. The continuity between Dempt and Aksum is debated. Architectural and material similarities exist, but direct evidence is scarce. In 2015, a ground survey near the village of Balau Kalau uncovered a line of large stones forming a low wall. Nearby were broken pottery fragments and a cluster of upright stones. A single fragment of South Arabian script was found, too weathered to translate. The site was not previously documented. It was added to the register and left undisturbed. In museums in Asmara and Addis Ababa, Dempt artifacts are displayed with cautious labels. Pre-Aksumite period. Yeha region. Stone platform, unknown function. The artifacts are arranged by type, ceramics, tools, ornaments, but rarely linked to individuals. The context is archaeological, not narrative. The exhibits are quiet. Modern development has destroyed or obscured many Dempt-era sites. Agricultural expansion, erosion and construction affect preservation. Some ruins are unrecognised by local communities. Others are protected as cultural heritage. Excavations are intermittent. Research is limited by access, funding, and geopolitical conditions. No chronicles tell of the founding of Dempt, no stone records the names of its rulers, no inscription describes its fall. The cities were built, used, and left behind. The temples were emptied, the walls collapsed, the memory faded. The stone blocks of Yeha still stand. The morning light falls across their weathered surfaces. The names of the masons are gone. The prayers once spoken, there are not remembered. The city is silent. The stones do not speak, but they are not empty. Beneath every buried wall, every unmarked grave, and every forgotten road lies a trace of a world once known. These were lives lived without monuments of words, only silence, soil, and time. What was lost was not just a name, but an entire way of seeing. We cannot recover their voices, but we can pause, we can look, and we can listen to what the ruins still hold. If these hidden histories moved you, and you want to explore more of what the past tried to tell us but we forgot, join us again. Subscribe to uncover the unseen, to remember the erased, and to keep walking deeper into the mysteries that time left behind.